Hi, I am Rabbi Avi Friedman of Congregation Or Shalom in Summit, New Jersey. In just the last few days, the families of 5 young women being held hostage in Gaza agreed to release the video of their sisters and daughters being taken into captivity. Perhaps you've seen it. It's rather difficult to watch. While the intent of the families was to put pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu to make a deal for the release of all the hostages, it's not clear that there is a deal to be made. Hamas has given no indication that they have any intention of releasing these hostages for anything less than full capitulation by Israel. They know how important hostages are to Israel. It was a part of their strategy on October 7th, and we have seen this before. Back in 2006, Hamas took a young Israeli soldier by the name of Gilad Shalit hostage. They held him for over 5 years and only released him in exchange for 1,027 Palestinian prisoners, one of whom was Yahya Sinwar, the mastermind of October 7th. The 5 young women in the video are also young soldiers, though they had barely begun their training. It should be obvious that Hamas is holding out for something big because they know how important redeeming captives is to our tradition. In the concluding chapters of the Book of Leviticus, we are introduced to the concept of redemption, pidyon. In the ancient world, when a person found themselves in debt, they could be taken into forced servitude in order to work off their debts. The Torah tells us that when a person is forced into such labor, such servitude by a non-Israelite, we have an obligation to redeem them. And that obligation extends to other situations when Jews are held against their will. It is an obligation that has been taken very seriously throughout Jewish history. The great sage Maimonides, in his Code of Law, the Mishneh Torah, wrote, "There is no greater commandment than the redemption of captives, pidyon shvuyim." Because of our commitment to pidyon shvuyim, Jews have been targeted throughout our history, especially in the Middle Ages. The Talmud perhaps foresaw this happening and warned that we should not pay too much for a captive, because it could lead to kidnappers targeting more Jews in order to demand even higher ransoms. Nonetheless, it is hard to resist hostage takers, whatever they demand. Just watching a few seconds of that video convinced me that Israel needs to restart negotiations for the release of the hostages immediately. It's actually a very strange calculation if you think about it, when one group of people ostensibly admits that another group of people places a higher value on its members being held captive. I mean, was Gilad Shalit really worth over 1,000 Palestinians back in 2011? And in the most recent framework for a deal between Hamas and Israel, Hamas reportedly demanded the release of 950 hostages for the first 40 Israeli hostages, some living, some dead. Is a single Israeli hostage really the equivalent of more than 20 Palestinians? This phenomenon is clearly related to the disparate military strategies of the two sides. One side puts its seniors, women, and children in shelters and sends its soldiers out to war, while the other side puts its soldiers in bunkers and places its seniors, women, and children in harm's way. One side values life, and the other side clearly doesn't. For Jews, it comes down to the question of what the whole purpose of Judaism is. One answer comes from earlier in the Book of Leviticus, when God says, "You are to keep my laws and regulations, which, when humans do them, they live by them." In other words, the whole point of Judaism is to preserve, promote, and protect life. And that is why we must all demand that the hostages are released immediately.